Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
Welcome back, everyone. We're super excited for our guest today. Jason, who do we have coming on?
Well, you have Seth Neary. Seth is actually shortening for Joseph, and that's really kind of cool. That's most people say Joe, and I've never really heard that before, so I like that. Seth Neary, he's the executive and founder of Neary Coaching, and he actually does that with his wife, and both of them together have 9 children, which is phenomenal. 3 of them are biological, 4 of them are adopted, and 2 of them are still in the foster system. So we admire you for taking on so much responsibility, and thank you for being on our podcast today.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to talk with you, and especially about making and passing on, generational wealth. This is a really exciting topic for me.
Cool. So how is it that you got into Neary Coaching, and what type of coaching is that?
Yeah, so just a quick kind of skip through history. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad while overseeing the command and control of 20 nuclear missiles in a launch control bunker in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Like way down underground, right?
Yeah. So buried, hardened bunker. Just imagine like this concrete pill, and in the middle of that concrete pill is suspended this box. And inside that box, you have a bunch of comm equipment. You have the console where you manage the nuclear missiles from. You have like a prison toilet, and then you have a bed mod that you sleep on. So you and your crew partner are down there anywhere from 24 to 72 hours at a time. And one of my crewmates, he was really into real estate, buying. He was buying. I believe at the time he was buying quads. There were a lot of quads being built in Cheyenne at the time, and he had some property in Nevada and Cheyenne, and he pulled me aside. He says, Zeph, I actually called me Neary. Everyone calls you by your last name in the military. You really got to check this out. And he started showing me what he was doing and the cost to buy a home, especially with the VA loan. You can buy and use the VA loan to buy like a quad, live in one, rent out the other 3. I'm like, well, that's great. That's great, but I have 5 kids. I'm not going to buy anyway. So we got into it, and it was that he gave me the book. He let me borrow the book, and that was the first aha moment I had, because I came from a poor dad family where it was go work really hard at school. We're not going to let you have a job. We're not going to let you work. Your job is school. You're going to get a scholarship. You're going to get a scholarship to college so you don't have to work as hard, and you get a really good education so you can go and get a really good job. And, I remember my dad talking about these stories of how he grew up with these people who just wanted to be rich. And like, he just kind of had such a negative connotation for people who wanted, to have financial independence. And it was just a complete 180 for me after I read that book. So we actually, what we did is I convinced my wife, like, hey, we're going to go buy a single family home. And then when we move, we're going to rent this out. And that's what we did. And that was kind of the first, real estate property that we had.
And are you still doing single family homes, or you moved into multiplexes, or what are you doing?
No. So we actually exited real estate due to a family emergency. I can get into that. So eventually I left the military to join my father-in-law's company, and the reason was that because he wanted to groom me, kind of take over the business. And eventually I realized, after several years, I was not a good fit for the business. It was doing something I really just outside of my zone of genius. It was an auditing firm. And I was over
you have too much personality to be an auditor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I left the Air Force. I just don't like dealing with it was just never ending paperwork and understanding systems of paperwork. And I was just dying inside. I needed more freedom. And so eventually I was talking to my wife, like, hey, look, this, I thought this could be the path forward, but I just can't do this anymore. We had talked about wanting to start our own coaching company for a few years. And so we decided one day after just a really grueling day at the office that we were going to transition and create our own company. We used the equity out of our home to start it, to fund it. And that's kind of how we got into Neary coaching. And we actually used the proceeds. We were actually living in her grandmother's home when we moved up here because her husband and her father, who was like 101 and just died. And we needed to use the funds from the sale of the commercial real estate, the single family, to purchase a home down here in Arizona. Anyways, so
tell us about the coaching. What kind of coaching do you do, and who's your ideal client?
Yeah, so I primarily do family success coaching. So, I grew up in a family. My parents separated 15 times, divorced each other 3 times. That left quite the emotional trauma in my life. It really wreaked havoc in I grew up in a family of 9 kids too.
Of 9?
Yeah. So I have 8 siblings. And during the Air Force, my wife also comes from a large family, and we both wanted a large family because despite the trauma, we both really enjoyed the large family lifestyle. But turns out she has autoimmune diseases, so she can't. It messed up her pregnancies pretty bad. Anyway, so we found ourselves, we had our 2 biological children. We're able to adopt 2 children. Somebody had a surprise pregnancy. And I was in the middle of a master's program. And so she's in postpartum depression. I'm pulling alert. I'm trying to get master's done. And things were just rough. And I did not want a repeat of what I grew up with. So we started working on how we can get our family to function despite the trauma we had both been through as growing up. And we actually came across a life coach. So we took the principles that we had learned in the military and then refined it from what I learned getting an MBA and working in a business, and took life coaching principles where you look a lot at CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy principles, how your thoughts lead to your emotions, emotions motivate actions, actions create results. And so you have to really just look at how you think about the circumstance. And we use that along with the principles of business to develop what we call a family operating system. And we primarily help the families of business owners and leaders who are really struggling with family relationships develop and implement a system that will help remove the conflict, address the roots of conflict, help them to identify values that can help bridge the conflict that they have, bridge the differences of their interests, help them develop a family vision, a family plan, and then be able to become the people who can make that happen. We help them develop processes for decision making, for developing processes in the home so it automates growth and reduces a lot of the constant need. In a startup, you can run the risk of owner dependency, and in families, you run the risk of parent dependency. So, all the children, their spouses constantly going to the one spouse or one parent for all the decision making. And so that parent slowly just gets worn down from the weight of bearing everybody. You're constantly thinking what needs to be happening, and they experience burnout. So we help them. My ideal client is someone who's has a very successful business, but a struggling family. And we can help them address the thoughts that are causing a lot of the stress in their lives, as well as how to handle that emotionally so that it's not being taken out on their employees or family.
What would you say is probably the number one cause of that stress? I mean, what is it, something that they're doing? I mean, it's interesting. A lot of entrepreneurs that start off, and I'm attempting to remember the book, something anyway, that they lose touch with what was fun. Like in the book, it gives us an example of this lady that makes incredible pies, right? And everybody says, you should go into the pie business. You should go into the pie business. You should be making pies. And so she starts a business and starts making pies, and everybody loves her pies. And then she needs to expand. And what she finds a few years into it is she hates it, right? For the fact that she's got to do accounting, she's got to do payroll, she's got to do this, she's got to do that, she's got to do this. And really very, very little of her time is making pies. And that's what she loves. What is it that you see when you're working with people that is maybe the number one cause of what that's happening that causes conflict in the family?
I would say it comes down to two things. Depending on the root of the stress. Now, if it's conflict, it's often a matter of conflicting values. So if it's conflict between two spouses, it's oftentimes because their values are in conflict, and they haven't found something to unite them to overcome the differences of interest, a superseding belief that they're willing to sacrifice to achieve that. And also, I call them biological biases. So let's take a business owner. I think the number one root cause for business owner burnout is either catastrophic thinking. If I don't work this extra hour, we won't achieve this. If I don't achieve this, then I'm a failure, or I just can't let that happen. So catastrophic thinking. One of the people I've talked with in the past, his name is Ron Nussbaum. He says that it's crucial for a business owner to let there be fires, but don't let the ship sink. You know, fires are going to happen. You can't be so on edge, constantly worried about fires that you aren't willing to delegate. You know, people believe that if I hold on to everything, I can make sure there aren't any fires and nothing goes wrong. And this is something you're a proponent of teams. We have to be willing to delegate and be okay knowing that we are strong enough, capable enough, smart enough to take care of problems as they arise. And then there's things that you can do. Once again, the mindset that I don't have to be everything. I don't have to do everything. There are smart people out there I can delegate to, and then we can take care of it. I think that removes a lot of stress out of people's lives because it's suddenly not all on them. And right person, right seat. You know, they also call it the zone of genius. The lady baking pies. Guess what? Accounting isn't probably her zone of genius.
Right. So you've often heard do your superpower and collaborate your weaknesses, right? And so it's curious because you kind of answered the way I thought you would, is that most solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, they end up attempting to do everything. And catastrophic thinking, that's a really interesting concept. Catastrophic thinking is causing them to think that they need to do everything, when in reality, it's exactly the opposite. They've got to let it go and find key people for their business. We earlier today, Scott and I, for another podcast interview, talked to a lady that helps people find and hire virtual assistants, and what a huge help that can be to people. So you got into real estate, then you got out of real estate, you've gone into this coaching now. Are you going back into real estate? You're going back into investing? What is it that you're feeling like you're going to do there?
Yeah, so I think once the company, because right now I'm reinvesting into the company as money comes in order to scale. Robert Kiyosaki talks about the different cash flow quadrants.
Right. That was his second book.
Yeah. And so, you have the business owners, then you have the investors, right? And I experienced with the single family home that I needed further education, but not the education that you go to school for. You need the education that comes from being a business owner. It's a different mentality. You identify, risk analysis. You just see what's important so differently when you're the business owner. And so I want to get back into investing. I want to get back into real estate. Because that's, you can't be constantly trading your time in for money, because it never works.
Absolutely. And then the reality is, one of the cool things that I've found with particularly in real estate, that is one area where you can hire out your weakness. Right. And sometimes it's very advantageous to do that. I don't want to be the guy that goes and knocks on the door and said, your rent's late, get out. Right. I want to hire that out. And it's taken a little while for me to get there, for the fact that I've done a lot of that managing myself. And that's been a very steep learning curve. And there's been some very, very expensive mistakes, to where you find a professional property manager and they give you a report at the end of the month, right? Plus a check, which is pretty cool. Another thing we often talk about on this podcast is one of the things that helps, we believe helps people be more successful, or helps every other investment be better. And that's the infinite banking concept. On a scale from, say, 1 to 5, what would you say is your understanding of that concept?
I'd say a 3.5. I don't know if you've ever heard of MPI. It's a very similar system where you take out a securities act, like often a life insurance policy, and you have the ability to borrow from yourself, and also leverage what's currently in the policy to create greater returns. And you have a floor, so you never go down beneath the floor, but also you also have a ceiling. So I think it's a similar concept, investing concept. So that's why I put it down at 3.5. Cool.
I love that. Yeah, there's been my experience that the concept is not a product. You mentioned life insurance or this or that. It's not necessarily that. It's more a process. It's a way of living. It's a way of looking at things, right? And way of valuing your time, number one, for what it is, and your cash. Most people discount the value of their own cash, and that can be a pretty huge mistake from a long-term point of view as far as their wealth building. When you don't value your own cash, people need to recognize that you finance everything you buy. And they said, no, I don't. I pay cash. I said, well, when the version of you today pays cash, the version of you in 10 years is financing that, for the fact they don't have the cash and they don't have the growth. You were going to say something, Scott?
I was going to say, a lot of times people know it as opportunity cost. And people just don't think about the other things that could happen. Is really what you're saying, boiling it down to.
True. Often opportunity cost is taken in a different context, and sometimes I avoid that. And Scott really likes to use that term. Yet that describes it very well. So, Seth, tell us, kind of throw it out there, what you think is going to be your next mountain you're going to climb. And we do this with most of our guests for two reasons. Number one is to give you an opportunity to put it out to the universe. And number two is to have an open invitation for you to come back on the podcast and celebrate with us when you have accomplished that. What is that you would put out there that you say, this is the next mountain I'm going to climb, and I'm going to be there in 3 to 5 years or whatever, and I'm coming back? Let us know.
Yeah, so it's scaling the business, right? So right now I'm a solopreneur. I'm the sole coach outside my wife, who coaches occasionally when she has time with 9 children. And so it's scaling the business, being able to take the systems and processes that I use and be able to have other coaches come on, learn them, and then teach them. And so that.
So put that's too nebulous.
5 years from
Come on,
now,
Seth. Put
what does it look
something
like?
out there. An annual revenue of $1 million. 10 coaches working for me. Make it concrete for us.
Sure. So my 10-year target is 100 million in revenue, where
cumulative.
So 10 million in revenue, multiple companies in multiple different industries, data and AI, and applying that in coaching, as well as in moving from just direct to consumers, also selling coaching services to other businesses, especially helping, providing coaching services to businesses who want to help their employees themselves with work-life balance and emotional management. So 100 million revenue, 10 years. Now, do you want a short term? Because I have a 10-year target, a 3-year picture.
Let's do a 3-year. Tell us your 3-year.
So 3 years? Okay. So in 3 year, I'm looking at 10 million. So 10 million.
10 million total revenue or an annual revenue?
Annual revenue. 10 million annual revenue in 3 years, where I have, multiple sales funnels and coaches who are doing a lot of that work. I have a lot of different products, online coaching products, in-person products, group coaching products, family retreats, business retreats. So multiple streams of company income, and I and my family have the ability and resources to take money from that company and start investing in commercial real estate.
Okay, love it. That's great, and that's a nice hard number. Nice what you're thinking. And seriously, we invite you to come back on the podcast, and even in the event that you would tell us when it's going to happen, would somehow celebrate with you. We had one guest that said, I want to speak to an audience of 100,000 people, and they said, you tell us when that's going to happen, we'll be on the front row, right? We want to celebrate with you, so we welcome you back. So grateful that you'd be on the podcast. It's been a lot of good information and good thinking. Everyone, we're going to put his contact information to where you can find his coaching program, how to get a hold of him in the show notes. So make sure you look in the show notes. Scott, any parting words they want to say?
No, that was great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Steph.
Thank you, Jason. It was wonderful talking with you.
Nice to talk to you.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.